No!
Okay.
I'm Cam again, the recording is back.
Thank you.
That's very cool, Gordon.
Very good.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Sweetness.
Hello.
Sorry.
Who is that? Who's that? Are you joining us, or what are you doing? What are you doing? She's going to sit on the book. Give me that. Furry swine. Right.
Night Circus! Night Circus!
I'm trying to see round the corner so I can see the cat. It's not working. Thank you.
Will.
I also want to see you.
Say hi to
It's
Lisa.
working.
Say hi to Lisa. Say hi.
Hi.
I heard it.
She's got the loudest purr.
I'll take that. Oh.
Oh. We hate each other.
I saw a
Good
beautiful
relationship
poem
based on
read by
mutual
a cat.
hate.
Yeah, it's very tense. Very tense situation we've got going on here. Right. I keep every time. I feel like the free chat goes on for longer and longer every time because I keep forgetting that we're technically here for something that isn't just hanging out with each other. Sorry.
I mean, ish.
Ish, yeah. Storytime, schmory time. In the words of Aristotle, storytime, schmory time.
Before we start, Frankie, could we get everything's all going to be okay? Because I think I'm going to need it today.
Of course. So, hold on, let me find Ben. Let me find you, darling. There he is. Right. So, this is specifically for Ben, but also for everybody, because you all need to know and you all need to hear it. So, are you all paying attention? Yeah? Okay. Everything's going to be all right. It's all going to be fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey.
You are the loveliest.
You're the fucking loveliest. You are. Don't make me come in there. Right. Shall we begin? Okay. Try not to boot the cat off the bed. Now, are you all sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Fire and light. You step into a bright, open courtyard surrounded by striped tents. Curving pathways along the perimeter lead away from the courtyard, turning into unseen mysteries dotted with twinkling lights. There are vendors traversing the crowd around you, selling refreshments and oddities, creations flavored with vanilla and honey, chocolate and cinnamon. A contortionist in a sparkling black costume twists on a platform nearby, bending her body into impossible shapes. A juggler tosses globes of black and white and silver high into the air, where they seem to hover before falling again into his hands, his attentive spectators applauding. All bathed in glowing light. The light emanates from a large bonfire in the center of the courtyard. As you walk closer, you can see that it sits in a wide black iron cauldron, balanced on a number of clawed feet. Where the rim of a cauldron would be, it breaks into long strips of curling iron, as though it has been melted and pulled apart like taffy. The curling iron continues up until it curls back into itself, weaving in and out among the other curls, giving it the cage-like effect. The flames are visible in the gaps between and rising slightly above. They are obscured only at the bottom, so it is impossible to tell what is burning, if it is wood or coal or something else entirely. The flames are not yellow or orange, but white as snow as they dance. Hidden Things, Concord, Massachusetts, October 1902. The arguments over Bailey's future begin early and occur frequently, though at this point they often devolve into repetitive phrases and tense silences. He blames Caroline for starting it, even though the raising of the issue was the fault of his maternal grandmother. Bailey is much more fond of his grandmother than of his sister, so he leaves the blame squarely on Caroline. Had she not given in, he would not have to fight as hard. It was one of their grandmother's requests disguised as a suggestion, one which seemed innocuous enough, that Caroline attend Radcliffe College. Caroline seemed intrigued by the idea through the entire length of tea in the cushioned, flower-wallpapered calm of their mother's Cambridge parlour. But any resolve she might have had about the matter disappeared as soon as they were back in Concord and their father's word came down. Absolutely not. Caroline accepted this with little more than a fleeting pout, deciding that it would probably be too much work, and she did not particularly care for the city anyway. Besides, Millie was engaged and there was a wedding to plan, a subject Caroline found far more interesting than her own education. And that was that. Then came the response from Cambridge, the grandmotherly decree that this was acceptable, but Bailey would be going to Harvard, of course. This one was not a request disguised as anything. This was pure demand. Finance-based protestations were crushed before they could be raised by the clear statement that his tuition would be taken care of. The arguments started before Bailey's opinion was even asked. "I would like to go," he said, when there came a pause long enough to fit the words in. "You are taking over the farm," was his father's response. The easy thing to do would be to let the issue drop and raise it again later, especially considering Bailey is not quite 16 and there is a substantial interim before either option will occur. Instead, and he is not entirely certain why, he keeps the subject alive, bringing it up as often as possible, pointing out that he could always go and return to the farm after the fact, that 4 years is not a terribly long time. These statements are met with lectures at first, but they soon become loudly voiced decrees and slammed doors. His mother stays out of the arguments as much as she can, but when pressed, she agrees with her husband, while at the same time quietly asserting that it should really be Bailey's decision. Bailey is not even certain he wants to go to Harvard. He does like the city more than Caroline, and it seems to him to be the option that holds the most mystery, the most possibility. Whereas the farm holds only sheep and apples and predictability. He can already envision how it will play out. Every day, every season, when the apples will fall and when the sheep will need shearing and when the frost will come. Always the same, year after year. He mentions something about the endless repetition to his mother, hoping it might turn into a more measured conversation about whether or not he will be allowed to leave. But she only says that she finds the cyclical nature of the farm comforting and asks if he have finished all his chores. The invitations to tea in Cambridge now arrive addressed only to Bailey, leaving his sister off entirely. Caroline mutters something about not having time for such things anyway, and Bailey attends alone, grateful to be able to enjoy the trip without Caroline's constant talking. "I do not particularly care whether or not you attend Harvard," his grandmother says one afternoon, though Bailey has not mentioned it. He generally attempts to avoid the subject, thinking he knows perfectly well where she stands. He adds another spoon of sugar to his tea and waits for her to elaborate. I believe it would offer you more opportunity, she continues, and that is something I would like you to have, even if your parents are not enthused about the idea. Do you know why I gave my daughter permission to marry your father? No, Bailey says. It is not a topic that has ever been discussed in his presence, though Caroline once told him in secret she heard it was something of a scandal. Even almost 20 years later, his father never sets foot in his grandmother's house, nor does she ever come out to Concord. Because she would have run off with him regardless, she says. That was what she wished. It would not have been my choice for her, but a child should not have their choices dictated for them. I have listened to you read books aloud to my cats. When you were 5 years old, you turned a laundry tub into a pirate ship and launched an attack against the hydrangeas in my garden. Do not try to convince me that you would choose that farm. I have a responsibility, Bailey says, repeating the word he has begun to hate. His grandmother makes a noise that may be a laugh or a cough or a combination of the two. Follow your dreams, Bailey, she says, be they Harvard or something else entirely. No matter what that father of yours says or how loudly he may say it. He forgets that he was someone's dream once himself. Bailey nods, and his grandmother sits back in her chair and complains about the neighbours for some time, not mentioning his father or his dreams again. Though before Bailey leaves, she adds, do not forget what I have said. I won't, he assures her. He does not tell her that he has only one dream, and it is just as improbable as a career in garden piracy. But he valiantly continues to debate with his father on a regular basis. Doesn't my opinion matter? He asks one evening, before the conversation escalates to door slamming. No, it does not, his father answers. Maybe you should let this go, Bailey, his mother says quietly after his father leaves the room. Bailey begins spending a great deal of time outside of the house. School does not take up as many hours as he would like. At first, he works more in the far rows of the orchards, choosing the farthest points from wherever his father happens to be. Then he resorts to taking long walks through fields and woods and cemeteries. He wanders past graves belonging to philosophers and poets, authors whose books he knows from his mother's library. And there are countless other headstones engraved with names he does not recognize, and more that have been so worn by time and wind that they are illegible, their owners long forgotten. He walks with no particular destination in mind, but the place he ends up most frequently is the very same oak tree he so often sat in with Caroline and her friends. It is more manageable now that he is taller, and he climbs to the topmost branches with ease. It is shaded enough to feel secluded, but bright enough to read when he brings books along, which soon becomes part of his routine. He reads histories and mythologies and fairy tales, wondering why it seems that only girls are ever swept away from their mundane lives on farms by knights or princes or wolves. It strikes him as unfair to not have the same fanciful opportunity himself. And he is not in the position to do any rescuing of his own. During the hours spent watching the sheep as they wander aimlessly around their fields, he even wishes that someone would come and take him away. But wishes on sheep appear to work no better than wishes on stars. He tells himself that it is not a bad life, that there is nothing wrong with being a farmer. But still, the discontent remains. Even the ground beneath his feet feels unsatisfying to his boots. so he continues to escape to his tree. To make the tree more his own, he even goes so far as to move the old wooden box in which he keeps his most valued possessions from its standard hiding spot beneath a loose floorboard under his bed to a nook in the oak tree, a substantial indentation that is not quite a hole but secure enough to serve the purpose. The box is fairly small, with tarnished brass hinges and clasps. It is wrapped in a scrap of burlap that does a fairly good job of keeping it protected from the elements, and it sits securely enough that it has not been dislodged by even the most resourceful squirrels. Its contents include a chipped arrowhead he found in a field when he was 5, a stone with a hole straight through it that is supposedly lucky, a black feather, a shiny rock that his mother said was some sort of quartz, a coin that was his first never-spent pocket money, the brown leather collar that belonged to the family dog who died when Bailey was 9, a solitary white glove that has gone rather grey from a combination of age and being kept in a small box with rocks, and several yellowed and folded pages filled with handwritten text. After the circus departed, he wrote down every detail he could remember about it so it would not fade in his memory. The chocolate-covered popcorn, the tent full of people on raised circular platforms performing tricks with bright white fire, the magical transforming clock that sat across from the ticket booth, doing so much more than simply telling the time. While he catalogued each element of the circus in shaky handwriting, he could not manage to record his encounter with the red-haired girl. He never told anyone about her. He looked for her at the circus during his 2 subsequent visits during proper nighttime hours, but he had not been able to find her. Then the circus was gone, vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, like a fleeting dream. And it has not returned. The only proof he has now that the girl even existed and was not a figment of his imagination is the glove. But he doesn't open the box anymore. It sits firmly closed in the tree. He thinks maybe he should throw it away, but he cannot bring himself to do it. Perhaps he will leave it in the tree and let the bark grow over it, sealing it inside. It is a grey Saturday morning, and Bailey is up earlier than the rest of the family, which is not unusual. He performs his chores as quickly as possible, packs an apple in his bag along with his book, and heads off to his tree. Halfway there, he thinks perhaps he should have worn his scarf, but the day is bound to get warmer as it goes along. Concentrating on that comforting fact, he climbs up past the bottom branches he was relegated 2 years ago, past the branches claimed by his sister and her friends. This is Millie's branch, he thinks as his foot touches it. A feeling of satisfaction comes when he climbs above Caroline's branch, even after all this time. Surrounded by leaves that rustle in the breeze, Bailey settles into his favourite spot, his boots resting close to his almost forgotten box of treasures. When he finally looks up from his book, Bailey is so shocked by the sight of the black and white striped tents in the field that he nearly falls out of the tree. Part 2. Illumination. There is so much that glows in the circus, from flames to lanterns to stars. I have heard the expression trick of the light applied to sites within Le Cirque des Rêves so frequently that I sometimes suspect the entirety of the circus is itself a complex illusion of illumination. Friedrich Thyssen, 1894. Opening Night 1. Inception. London, October 13th and 14th, 1886. Opening day, or opening night rather, is spectacular. Every last detail is planned, and a massive crowd gathers outside the gates long before sundown. When they are finally allowed to enter, they do so wide-eyed, and as they move from tent to tent, their eyes only get wider. Every element of the circus blends together in a wonderful coalescence. Acts that have been training in separate countries on separate continents now perform in adjacent tents, each part melding seamlessly into a whole. Each costume, each gesture, each sign on each tent is more perfect than the last. The air itself is ideal, clear and crisp and cool, permeated with scents and sounds that entice and enchant one patron after another. At midnight, the bonfire is ceremoniously lit, having spent the earlier part of the evening standing empty, appearing to be a simple sculpture of twisted iron. 12 of the fire performers quietly enter the courtyard with small platforms that they set up along the perimeter, like numbers on a clock. Precisely 1 minute before the hour, they each ascend their relative platforms and pull from their backs shimmering black bows and arrows. At 30 seconds before midnight, they light the tips of their arrows with small dancing yellow flames. Those in the crowd who had not noticed them previously now watch in wonder. At 10 seconds before the hour, they raise their bows and aim the flaming arrows at the waiting well of curling iron. As the clock begins to chime near the gates, the first archer lets his arrow fly, soaring over the crowd and hitting its mark in a shower of sparks. The bonfire ignites in an eruption of yellow flame. Then the second chime follows. The second archer sends his arrow into the yellow flames, and they become a clear sky blue. A third chime with a third arrow, and the flames are a warm, bright pink. Flames the colour of a ripe pumpkin follow the fourth arrow. A fifth, and the flames are scarlet red. A sixth brings a deeper, sparkling crimson. 7, and the fire is soaked in a colour like an incandescent wine. 8, and the flames are shimmering violet. 9, and violet shifts to indigo. A 10th chime, a 10th arrow, and the bonfire turns deepest midnight blue. On the penultimate chime, the dancing flames change from blue to black, and for that moment it is difficult to discern the fire from its cauldron. And on the final strike, the dark flames are replaced with a blinding white, a shower of sparks falling like snowflakes around it. Huge curls of dense white smoke swirl up into the night sky. The reaction from the crowd is uproarious. The spectators who had been considering taking their leave decide to stay just a bit longer and comment enthusiastically about the lighting of the fire. Those who do not witness it themselves hardly believe the stories told minutes or hours later. People roam from tent to tent, wandering down paths that loop over each other, never seeming to end. Some enter each tent they pass, while others are more selective, choosing tents to enter after careful consideration of signs. Some find a particular tent so fascinating that they are unable to exit it, opting instead to stay there for the duration of their visit. Patrons make suggestions to other patrons they pass on the concourses, pointing out remarkable tents they have visited already. Their advice is always taken with pleasure, though often the advisees are distracted by other tents before they locate the recommended ones. It is difficult to usher the remaining patrons out as the dawn creeps up, and they are only consoled by assurances that they may return when the sun sets again. All told, opening night is an undeniable success. There is only one minor mishap of sorts, one unexpected occurrence. It passes unnoticed by any of the patrons, and many of the performers are not aware of it until after the fact. Just before sunset, while the last-minute preparations are being made, costumes adjusted, caramel melted, the wife of the wildcat tamer unexpectedly goes into labour. She is, when not in a delicate state, her husband's assistant. Their act has been subtly modified for her absence, but the cats themselves seem agitated. She is expecting twins, though they are not due for a few more weeks. People joke afterward that perhaps they did not want to miss opening night. A doctor is brought to the circus before it opens to the public and escorted discreetly backstage for the delivery, an easier feat to accomplish than moving her to a hospital. 6 minutes before midnight, Winston Aidan Murray is born. 7 minutes after midnight, his sister, Penelope Ashlyn Murray, follows. When the news is relayed to Chandresh Christophe Lefebvre, he is mildly disappointed that the twins are not identical. He had thought up various roles in the circus for identical twins to perform once the children were old enough. Fraternal twins, on the other hand, lack the amount of theatricality he had expected. But he has Marco arrange the delivery of 2 enormous bouquets of red roses anyway. They are tiny things, each with a rather surprising amount of bright red hair. They barely cry, staying awake and alert, with matching pairs of wide blue eyes. They are wrapped in spare bits of silk and satin, white for her, black for him. A steady stream of circus performers comes to see them in between acts, taking turns holding them and inevitably remarking on their exquisite timing. They will fit right in, everyone says, save for their hair. Someone suggests hats until they are old enough for hair dye. Someone else remarks that it would be a travesty to dye over such a colour, a shocking red much brighter than their mother's auburn. It is an auspicious colour, Tsukiko comments, but she refuses to elaborate on her meaning. She kisses each twin on the forehead and later makes strings of folded paper cranes to hang above their cradle. Close to dawn, when the circus is emptying, they are taken for a walk around the tents and into the courtyard. The purpose is ostensibly to lull them to sleep, but they stay awake, watching the lights and the costumes and the stripes on the tents around them, strangely alert for being only a few hours old. Not until the sun has risen do they finally close their eyes, side by side in the black wrought iron cradle lined with striped blankets that already awaits them, despite their early arrival. It was delivered as a gift a few weeks earlier, though it had no card or note. The Murrays assumed it was a gift from Chandresh, though when they thanked him for it, he claimed he had no idea what they were talking about. The twins quite like it, regardless of its dubious origins. No one recalls afterwards exactly who it was that dubbed them Poppet and Widget. As with the cradle, no one takes credit for it. But the nicknames stick, as nicknames do. Another?
Yes.
It's only been 30 minutes.
Has it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the next one's only 4 pages. Maybe we could do 2 more?
Yes.
I'll do the first one, see how we go. Okay. Opening night 2. Sparks. London, October 13th and 14th, 1886. Marco spends the first several hours of opening night taking surreptitious glances at his watch, waiting impatiently for the hands to reach midnight. The unexpected early arrival of the Murray twins had complicated his schedule already, but if the lighting of the bonfire proceeds as planned, that should be enough. It is the best solution he can come up with, knowing that in a few weeks the circus will be hundreds of miles away, leaving him alone in London. And while Isabel may prove helpful, he needs a stronger tie. Ever since he discovered the venue for the challenge, he has been slowly taking on more responsibility for the circus, doing all that Chandresh asked of him and more, to the point where he was given free rein, with everything from approving the design of the gates to ordering the canvas for the tents. It worries him, the scope of the binding. He has never attempted anything on this scale, but there seems no good reason not to start off the game as strongly as possible. The bonfire will provide him with a connection to the circus, even though he is not entirely certain how well it will work. And with so many people involved, it seems sensible to add an element of safety to the venue. It has taken months of preparation. Chandresh was more than willing to let him organise the lighting, having already deemed him invaluable to the circus planning with only mild coercion. A wave of a hand and the details were all up to him. And, most important, Chandresh agreed to let it be a secret. The lighting itself took on the air of a midnight dinner, with no questions permitted as to the ingredients or menu. No answers provided as to what the arrows are tipped with to create such an astonishing effect, how the flames are made to shift from one vibrant hue to another. Those who did inquire during preparations and rehearsals were told that to reveal the methods would ruin the effect. Though, of course, Marco has been unable to rehearse the most important part. It is easy enough for him to slip away from Chandresh in the crowded courtyard just before midnight. He makes his way towards the twisted iron, moving as close as he can to the empty cauldron. He takes a large leather-bound notebook from his coat, a perfect copy of one that has been safely locked in his office. No one in the milling crowd notices as he tosses it into the bottom of the cauldron. It lands with a thud that is muffled by the ambient noise. The cover flips open, exposing the elaborate ink tree to the star-speckled night sky. He stays close to the edge of the twisted metal while the archers take their places. His attention remains focused on the flames despite the press of patrons around him, as the fire is amplified through a rainbow of hues. When the last arrow lands, he closes his eyes. The white flames burn red through his eyelids. Celia expected to feel like a poor imitation of her father during her first performances, but to her relief, the experience is vastly different from the one she watched so many times in theatre after theatre. The space is small and intimate. The audiences are modest enough that they remain individual people rather than blending into an anonymous crowd. She finds she is able to make each performance unique, letting the response of the audience inform what she chooses to do next. While she enjoys it more than she thought she would, she is grateful that she has stretches of time to herself in between. As it nears midnight, she decides to see if she can find a place to discreetly watch the lighting of the bonfire. But as she makes her way through the area that is already being referred to as backstage, despite the lack of stage, she is quickly swept up in the somewhat ordered chaos surrounding the impending birth of the Murray twins. Several of the performers and staff have gathered, waiting anxiously. The doctor who has been brought in seems to find the entire situation strange. The contortionist comes and goes. Aidan Murray paces like one of his cats. Celia endeavours to be as helpful as she can, which consists mainly of fetching cups of tea and finding new and creative ways to assure people that everything will be fine. It reminds her so much of consoling her old spiritualist clients that she is surprised when she is thanked by name. A soft cry that sounds minutes before midnight comes as a relief, met by sighs and cheers. And then something else immediately follows. Celia feels it before she hears the applause echoing from the courtyard, the shift that suddenly spreads through the circus like a wave. It courses through her body, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine, almost knocking her off her feet. "Are you all right?" a voice behind her says, and she turns to find Tsukiko laying a warm hand on her arm to steady her. The too-knowing gleam that Celia is beginning to find familiar shines in the contortionist's smiling eyes. "I'm fine, thank you," Celia says, struggling to catch her breath. "You are a sensitive person," Tsukiko says. "It is not unusual for sensitive people to be affected by such events." Another cry echoes from the adjoining chamber, joining the first in a gentle chorus. They have remarkable timing, Tsukiko says, turning her attention to the newborn twins. Celia can only nod. It is a shame you missed the lighting, Tsukiko continues. It was remarkable as well. While the Murray twins' cries subside, Celia tries to shake the feeling that remains tingling over her skin. She is still unsure who her opponent is, but whatever move has just been made, it has rattled her. She feels the entirety of the circus radiating around her, as though a net has been thrown over it, trapping everything within the iron fence, fluttering like a butterfly. She wonders how she is supposed to retaliate. Opening night 3. Smoke and Mirrors. London, October 13th and 14th, 1886. Chandresh Christophe Lefebvre enters not a single tent on opening night. Instead, he wanders through pathways and concourses and walks in loops around the courtyard with Marco in tow, who is taking notes whenever Chandresh finds something to comment upon. Chandresh watches the crowd, discerning how people decide which tents to enter. He identifies signage that needs to be adjusted or elevated to be easier to read, doors that are not visible enough and others that are too predominant, drawing too little attention or too much of a crowd. But these are minute details, really, extra oil for inaudible squeaking. It could not be better. The people are delighted. The line for tickets snakes around the outside of the fence. The entire circus glistens with excitement. A few minutes before midnight, Chandresh positions himself by the edge of the courtyard for the lighting of the bonfire. He chooses a spot where he can view both the bonfire and a good portion of the crowd. "Everything is ready for the lighting, correct?" he asks. No one answers him. He turns to his left and his right, finding only giddy patrons streaming past. "Marco?" he says, but Marco is nowhere to be found. One of the Burgess sisters spots Chandresh and approaches him, carefully navigating her way through the crowded courtyard. "Hello, Chandresh," she says when she reaches him. "Is something wrong?" "I seem to have misplaced Marco," he says. "Strange. But nothing to worry about, lady dear." "Tara," she corrects. "You look alike," Chandresh says, puffing on his cigar. "It's confusing. You should stay together as a set to avoid such faux pas." "Really, Chandresh? We're not even twins." "Which one of you is older, then?" "That's a secret," Tara says, smiling. "May we declare the evening a success yet?" "So far it is satisfactory, but the night is relatively young, my dear. How is Mrs. Murray?" "She's doing fine, I believe, though it's been an hour or two since I heard any news. Will make for a memorable birthday for the twins, I should think." "They might be useful if they're as indistinguishable as you and your sister. We could put them in matching costumes." Tara laughs. "You might wait until they can walk, at least." Around the unlit cauldron that will hold the bonfire, 12 archers are taking their positions. Tara and Chandresh halt their conversation to watch. Tara observes the archers, while Chandresh watches the crowd as their attention is drawn to the display. They turn from crowd to audience as though choreographed along with the archers, everything proceeding precisely as planned. The archers let their arrows fly, one by one, sending the flames through a rainbow of conflagration. The entire circus is doused in colour as the clock tolls, 12 deep chimes reverberating through the circus. On the 12th knell, the bonfire blazes, white and hot. Everything in the courtyard shudders for a moment, scarves fluttering despite the lack of any breeze, the fabric of the tents quivering. The audience bursts into applause. Tara claps along, while beside her, Chandresh stumbles, dropping his cigar to the ground. "Chandresh, you all right?" Tara asks. "I feel rather dizzy," he says. Tara takes Chandresh by the arm to steady him, pulling him closer to the side of the nearest tent, out of the way of the crowd that has started moving again, spilling out in all directions. "Did you feel that?" he asks her. His legs are shaking, and Tara struggles to support him as they are jostled by passers-by. "Feel what?" she asks, but Chandresh does not reply, still clearly unsteady. "Why did no one think to put benches in the courtyard?" Tara mutters to herself. "Is there a problem, Miss Burgess?" a voice asks behind her. She turns to find Marco hovering behind her, notebook in hand and looking quite concerned. "Oh, Marco, there you are," Tara says. "Something's wrong with Chandresh." They're beginning to attract stares from the crowd. Marco takes Chandresh's arm and pulls him into a quieter corner, standing with his back to the courtyard to provide a modicum of privacy. "Has he been like this long?" Marco asks Tara as he steadies Chandresh. "No, came on quite suddenly," she replies. "I worry he might faint." "I'm sure it's nothing," Marco tells her. "The heat, perhaps. I can handle this, Miss Burgess. It's nothing to concern yourself with." Tara furrows her brow, reluctant to leave. "It's nothing," Marco repeats emphatically. Chandresh looks at the ground as though he has lost something, not seeming to register the conversation at all. "If you insist," Tara relents. "He's in perfectly good hands, Miss Burgess," Marco says. And then he turns before she can say another word, and he and Chandresh walk off into the crowd. "There you are," Lainey says, appearing at her sister's shoulder. "Been looking for you everywhere. Did you see the lighting? Wasn't it spectacular?" "Indeed," Tara says, still scanning the crowd. "Whatever is the matter?" Lainey asks. "Did something happen?" "How much do you know about Chandresh's assistant?" Tara asks in response. "Marco?" "Not very much," Lainey says. "He's worked for Chandresh for a few years, specialises in accounting. Before that, he was a scholar of some sort, I believe. I'm not entirely sure what he studied, or where for that matter. He's not particularly talkative." "Why'd you ask? Seeking another dark and handsome conquest?" Tara laughs, despite her distraction. "No, nothing like that. Only curiosity." She takes her sister by the arm. "Let us go and seek out other mysteries to explore for the moment." Arm in arm, they navigate the crowd, circling around the glowing bonfire that many patrons are still gazing at, mesmerized by the dancing white flames. The Hanged Man. In this tent, suspended high above you, there are people. Acrobats, trapeze artists, aerialists, illuminated by dozens of round glowing lamps hanging from the top of the tent like planets or stars. There are no nets. You watch the performers from this precarious vantage point, directly below the performers with nothing in between. There are girls in feathered costumes who spin at various heights, suspended by ribbons that they can manipulate. Marionettes that control their own strings. Normal chairs with legs and backs act as trapezes. Round spheres that resemble bird cages rise and descend, while one or more aerialists move from within the sphere to without, standing on the top or hanging from the bars on the bottom. In the centre of the tent, there is a man in a tuxedo, suspended by one leg that is tied with a silver cord, hands clasped behind his back. He begins to move, extremely slowly. His arms reach out from his sides, first one and then the other, until they hang below his head. He starts to spin, faster and faster, until he is only a blur at the end of the rope. He stops, suddenly, and he falls. The audience dives out of the way below him, clearing a space of bare, hard ground below. You cannot bear to watch. You cannot look away. Then he stops at eye level with the crowd, suspended by the silver rope that now seems endlessly long. top hat undisturbed on his head, arms calmly by his sides. As the crowd regains its composure, he lifts a gloved hand and removes his hat. Bending at the waist, he takes a dramatic, inverted bow. The end.
More?
How was that, everybody?
It's so good.
Enjoy
Are you
it?
sure we can't do more?
Do you want another one?
Yes.
Yeah?
Only 10 to 10.
We started late, so I think one more would make sense.
Yeah, it would be rude not to.
Yeah.
Let me see what it is.
Totally rude. So rude. Can't believe we're considering not having another one.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. I'll do better next time, I promise.
We love you.
It's all right, Frankie. We forgive you.
Yeah, you're
We need to
reading
get
more,
through the
so
book.
you can't be mad.
You're too good to me. Right. One more then. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Oneiromancy, Concord, Massachusetts, October 1902. Bailey spends the entire day willing the sun to set, but it defies him and keeps its usual pace across the sky, a pace that Bailey has never really thought about before, but today finds excruciatingly slow. He almost wishes it were a school day, so he would have something to help pass the hours. He wonders if he should take a nap, but he is far too excited about the sudden appearance of the circus to possibly sleep. Dinner passes the same way it has for months, stretches of silence broken by his mother's attempts at polite conversation and Caroline's occasional sighs. His mother mentions the circus, or more specifically, the influx of people it will bring. Bailey expects the silence to fall again, but instead Caroline turns to him. "Didn't we dare you to sneak into the circus the last time it was here, Bailey?" Her tone is curious and light, as though she truly does not remember whether or not such a thing occurred. "What, during the day?" his mother asks. Caroline nods vaguely. "Yes," Bailey says quietly, willing the uncomfortable silence to return. "Bailey," his mother says, managing to turn his name into a disappointment-laced admonishment. Bailey is not certain how it is his fault, being the daree, not the darer, but Caroline responds before he can protest. "Oh, he didn't do it," she says, as though she now recalls the incident clearly. Bailey only shrugs. "Well, I would hope not," his mother says. The silence resumes, and Bailey stares out the window, wondering what exactly constitutes nightfall. He thinks perhaps it would be best to get to the gates as soon as it could even remotely be considered dusk, and wait if necessary. His feet feel itchy beneath the table, and he wonders how soon he will be able to escape. It takes ages to clear the table, an eternity to help his mother with the dishes. Caroline disappears to her room and his father pulls out the newspaper. "Where are you going?" his mother asks as he puts on his scarf. "I'm going to the circus," Bailey says. "Don't be too late," she says. "You have work to do." "I won't," Bailey says, relieved that she has neglected to specify a time, leaving "too late" up to interpretation. "Take your sister," she adds. Only because there is no way to leave the house without his mother watching to see whether or not he stops at Caroline's room, Bailey knocks at the half-closed door. "Go away," his sister says. "I'm going to the circus if you would care to join me," Bailey says, his voice dull. He already knows what her answer will be. "No," she says, as predictable as the dinner-time silence. "How childish," she adds, shooting him a disdainful glare. Bailey leaves without another word, letting the wind slam the front door behind him. The sun is just beginning to set, and there are more people out than usual at this time of day, all walking in the same direction. As he walks, his excitement begins to wane. Perhaps it is childish. Perhaps it will not be the same. When he reaches the field, there is already a crowd gathered, and he is relieved that there are plenty of patrons his own age or much older, and only a few have children with them. A pair of girls around his age giggles as he passes them, trying to catch his eye. He cannot tell if it is meant to be flattering or not. Bailey finds a spot to stand within the crowd. He waits, watching the closed iron gates, wondering if the circus will be different than he remembers. And he wonders in the back of his mind if the red-haired girl in white is in there somewhere. The low orange rays from the sun make everything, including the circus, look as though it is aflame before the light disappears completely. It is quicker than Bailey expected, the moment that shifts from fire to twilight, and then the circus lights begin flickering on all over the tents. The crowd oohs and ahs appropriately, but a few in the front gasp in surprise when the massive sign above the gates begins to sputter and spark. Bailey can't help but smile when it is fully lit, shining like a beacon. Les Cirques de Rêve. While the day of waiting was tediously slow, the line to enter the circus moves remarkably fast, and soon Bailey is standing at the ticket booth, purchasing a single admission. The winding path, speckled with stars, seems endless as he feels his way through the dark turns, anxiously anticipating the brightness at the end. The first thing he thinks when he reaches the illuminated courtyard is that it smells the same, of smoke and caramel and something else that he cannot place. He is not sure where to start. There are so many tents, so many choices. He thinks perhaps he should walk around a bit first before deciding which tents to enter. He thinks also that by simply wandering the circus, he might improve his chances of happening upon the red-haired girl, though he refuses to admit to himself that he is looking for her. Silly to look for a girl he only met once under extremely strange circumstances several years ago. There's no reason to believe that she'd even remember him or recognize him, and he is not entirely sure he would recognize her either, for that matter. He decides to walk into the circus, through the courtyard with a bonfire and out the other side, and then attempt to work his way back. It is as good a plan as any, and the crowd might not be as thick on the far side. But first he thinks he should get a mulled cider. It does not take him long to find the proper vendor in the courtyard. He pays for his cup, the steaming concoction contained in a black and white marble swirls, and wonders for a moment before his first sip if it won't taste as good as he remembers. He has recalled that taste countless times in his head, and despite the wealth of apples in the area, no cider with or without spices has ever tasted as good. He hesitates before taking the tiniest of sips. It tastes even better than he remembers. He picks a path to take, and along it, between the entrances to the surrounding tents, there is a small group gathered around a raised platform. A woman stands on the platform in a very fitted costume covered in black and silver swirls. She is twisting and bending in such a way that it seems both horrible and elegant. Bailey stops to join the spectators, even though it is almost painful to watch. The contortionist lifts a small silver metal hoop from the ground, brandishing it with a few simple but impressive movements. She passes it to a man in front of the crowd in order to establish that it is solid. When he hands it back to her, she passes her entire body through it, extending her limbs in fluid, dance-like motions. After discarding the hoop, she places a small box in the center of the platform. The box looks no more than a foot wide or high, though in reality it is slightly larger than that. While the act of a fully grown, if below average size woman condensing herself into such a confined space would be impressive regardless of the details of the box, it is made even more impressive in this case by the fact that this box is made of glass, completely transparent. The edges are metal, oxidized to a blackish tinge, but the side panels in the lid are clear glass, so she is visible the entire time as she bends and twists and folds herself into the tiny space. She does it slowly, making each minute movement part of the show, until her body and head are completely within the box, and only her hand remains without, sticking out the top. The view from Bailey's perspective looks impossible. A bit of leg here, the curve of a shoulder there, part of her other arm underneath a foot. Only one hand remains. It waves cheerfully before pulling the lid closed. It latches automatically, and the box is undeniably closed, with the contortionist clearly visible inside. And then the glass box with the woman trapped inside slowly fills with white smoke. It curls through the tiny cracks and limbs not occupied by limbs or torso, and seeps between her fingers as they press against the glass. The smoke thickens, obscuring the contortionist completely. There is only white smoke visible inside the box, and it continues to ripple and undulate against the glass. Suddenly, with a popping noise, the box breaks. The glass panels fall to the sides and the lid collapses downward. Curls of smoke rise into the night air. The box, or rather the small pile of glass upon the platform that had once been a box, is empty. The contortionist is gone. The crowd waits for several moments, but nothing happens. The last wisps of smoke dissipate. The crowd begins to dissipate. Bailey takes a closer look as he walks by, wondering if the contortionist is somehow concealed in the platform, but it is solid wood and open underneath. She has vanished completely, despite the plain evidence that there was nowhere for her to go. Bailey continues down the winding path. He finishes his cider and finds a bin to discard his cup, though as soon as he places it within the shadowed container, it seems to vanish. He walks on, reading signs, trying to decide which tent to enter. Some are large and decorated with flourishes and long descriptions of their contents. But the one that catches his eye is smaller, as is the tent on which it hangs. Looping white letters on a black background. Feats of illustrious illusion. The entrance is open, and a line of patrons files into the illusionist's tent. Bailey joins them. Inside, it is lit by a line of black iron sconces along the rounded wall, and contains nothing but a ring of plain wooden chairs. There are only about 20 of them, in 2 staggered rows, so that the view from each seat is comparable. Bailey chooses a seat in the inside row across from the entrance. The rest of the seats fill quickly, save for 2, the one to his immediate left and another across the circle. Bailey notices 2 things at once. First, that he can no longer see where the entrance had been. The space where the audience had entered now appears to be solid wall, seamlessly blending with the rest of the tent. Second, there is now a dark-haired woman in a black coat sitting to his left. He is certain that she was not there before the door disappeared. Then his attention is removed from both of these events as the empty chair across the circle bursts into flame. The panic is instant. Those occupying the chairs closest to the flaming chair abandon their seats and rush for the door, only to find that there is no longer a door to be found, only a solid wall. The flames grow steadily higher, staying close to the chair, licking around the wood, though it does not appear to be burning. Bailey looks again at the woman to his left, and she winks at him before standing and walking to the centre of the circle. Amidst the panic, she calmly unbuttons her coat and removes it, tossing it with a delicate gesture towards the burning chair. What had been a heavy wool coat becomes a long piece of black silk that ripples like water over the chair. The flames vanish. Only a few lingering wisps of smoke remain, along with the sharp smell of charred wood that is slowly changing to the comforting smell of a fireplace, tinged with something like cinnamon or clove. The woman, standing in the centre of the circle of chairs, pulls back the black silk with a flourish, revealing a still intact chair on which now perch several snow-white doves. Another flourish, and the black silk folds and curves in on itself, becoming a black top hat. The woman places it on her head, topping off an ensemble that looks like a ball gown fashioned out of the night sky. Black silk dotted with sparkling white crystals. She acknowledges her audience with a subtle bow. The illusionist has made her entrance. A few people, including Bailey, managed to applaud, while those who had abandoned their seats returned to them, looking both disturbed and curious. The performance is continuous. The displays Bailey has difficulty thinking of as tricks meld one into the other. The doves vanish frequently, only to reappear on hats or under chairs. There is also a black raven, far too large to have been cleverly concealed. It is only after the performance has gone on for some time that Bailey slowly realizes that because of the circle of chairs, the shape and closeness of the space, there is no room for mirrors or tricks of the light. Everything is immediate and palpable. She even transforms one audience member's pocket watch from metal to sand and back again. At one point, all the chairs float some distance off the ground, and while the movement is steady and secure, Bailey's toes barely graze the floor and he clutches the sides of his chair nervously. At the end of the act, the illusionist takes a bow with a pivoting turn, acknowledging the entire circle as the audience applauds. As she completes the rotation, she is no longer there. Only a few sparkling shimmers remain, echoes of the crystals in her gown. The door reappears in the side of the tent, and the small audience makes their way out. Bailey lags behind, glancing back as he leaves at the spot where the illusionist had been. Outside, though it was not there before, is another raised platform, much like the one the contortionist stood on. But the figure on this platform does not move. Bailey almost thinks it is a statue, dressed in a white gown edged in matching fur that cascades beyond the platform to the ground. Her hair and skin, even her eyelashes, are an icy white. But she moves. Very, very slowly. So slowly that Bailey cannot pinpoint exact motions, only slight changes. Soft flakes of iridescent snow float to the ground, falling from her like leaves from a tree. Bailey walks around, looking at her from every angle. Her eyes follow him, though the snow-flecked lashes do not blink. There is a small silver plaque on the platform, partially obscured by the cascading gown. It reads, "In Memoriam," though it does not specify for whom. Everyone on my screen currently is asleep.
Oh no,
How do people sleep through that?
God. So many questions.
Ask your questions, Gordon.
Oh,
Did you
there's
just
like
finish?
4 or 5. Oh my God. So, okay, one is, right, so it's confusing because the times are slightly, like at the start, it's like 1896, so I'm suddenly thinking I need to create a timeline in my head because what's happening when, I've no idea. So I don't know how the people who are falling asleep are ever knowing what's going on. But I'm assuming, I don't know, but time-wise, does it make sense that the girl in white that Bailey met is one of the twins that were born in the thing? That feels like what's happening there. And completely explains why they have that accent that they do, because it's circus accent. And also, your Scottish accent is brilliant. It is genuinely awesome. I was like,
Is it?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I mean, it's like it was like watching Brave or something like that, and they have actual Scottish people in that, so it was good. I like
Thank
it.
you.
And
Like,
okay,
genuinely, thank you for that. I was really, really, really worried that it would not even sound Scottish. So as long
oh no, it
as long
sounded Scottish.
it sounds like it's supposed to be Scottish, that's okay.
Definitely. Oh, and another thing. So, wait, hold on. I have too many things. Yes, there was one point where the oh, what's her name? Was it? It was someone who was saying that they had spent all their time. It was the one who had, I think it was Celia, where she was saying she spends a lot of time just assuring people that it'll be okay. Everything will be, and I'm like, I see where this is going. You're actually an illusionist. And also, I realized why this book is like, because I felt Chocolat was a lot calmer than this book.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a known fact that the Night Circus is intense.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I hate you.
How much of that was lead up just to that pun?
Hate you. So
You're the
much.
worst, Gordon. You are the worst.
I realize.
Well, I
I'm
boot
so
him out of
glad we have that
conversation. I can do
recorded.
that.
Get right out into the sea.
Put myself on mute. I'm going to the sea.
You totally roped us in there, Gordon.
I turned him off.
We actually planned this whole thing between us. The whole reason that we're doing the Night Circus is just for that moment, so that Gordon can do that joke. Oh man, this is so good. I'm really enjoying this.
So good. Are you aware of because it's in the blurb, I think, the theatre company that inspired the book?
Really?
Yeah. But they're not really doing much anymore, which is a shame because I wish. So there was a theatre company called Punch Drunk Productions back like.
I love Punch Drunk.
I never saw any of their stuff when they were going, which is really annoying.
Yeah, they. I think it was Punch Drunk who did. I didn't get to see. They did a Macbeth. They did like some kind of. I think it was Macbeth, some sort of fucking incredible immersive.
You want
Macbeth.
to describe it for everyone else for context?
Supposed to be amazing. So Punch Drunk, they do. Yeah, it's kind of immersive theatre, isn't it? Like they'll put on some kind of production in like a warehouse and sort of every room, and you kind of wander around and experience. So there's sort of different stories or different kind of scenes playing out, like multiple narratives and multiple storylines. And so it's, you know, you can't experience the whole of a piece just going once. Like you choose what rooms to go to and what bits to listen to. Willow's come back. Do you like theatre?
Hi, Willow.
Yeah,
What do you
it's
think?
a bit like I think Secret Cinema now, where it's an immersive thing and like you go between different areas and it's not one thing, and apparently going to that is what inspired the author to come up with the Night Circus. Is like this circus where you walk between different rooms and everything else.
Imagine being the theatre that inspired like the magic of the Night Circus. That would be so cool. That's like just ultimate validation for your project.
Yeah.
Imagine if Punch Drunk did a production of the Night Circus.
So meta.
Not sure they're really going anymore.
Oh no!
That's a
What?
shame. I went to one of their things in London. It was amazing.
Oh
It's a Malcolm.
Hello.
Malcolm, we got Malcolm.
Punch Drunk are still going, just not at the minute because nobody's going because of Corona.
Yeah, that is true.
They're very much still in existence, but right now.
I really wanted to go and do the Secret Cinema thing. There's a guy I know from uni is a cast member for Secret Cinema, and he gave me like a discount code thing for tickets for the Stranger Things one, but I just didn't manage to make it down.
I was going to go to the day.
There was a Stranger Things one? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what is Secret Cinema?
Yeah.
I've never actually been to any of the Secret Cinema ones. Has anyone else been?
I went to Moulin
I've heard of
Rouge.
it. I've always wanted to go.
What was that, Nick?
I went to Moulin Rouge, which was
Oh my god!
absolutely insane.
Oh my god! I'm so
So-
jealous.
Secret cinema, for anyone who doesn't know it, you sign up and they send you a character and you have to go in full costume. It's a limited number of invites. Everybody has to go in costume and you have a character and you have a mission. And when you go in there, they take your phone off you, all electrical equipment gets confiscated, everything. You go in and you're in a big warehouse, which is the set of the film that you've gone in to see. And it's totally immersive. So you go to bars and buy drinks, and it's the bars like, you bought drinks from the Moulin Rouge in this case. And there are scenes from the film happening around you all over the place, and like you get to join in little bits and what have you. And then eventually you all go through to the actual cinema and you watch the film. But while you're watching the film, they're acting it out as well in front of the screen on stage and all around you. So, like,
How was the tango
in Moulin
scene?
Rouge, they had some
Oh my god, the tango scene, shit.
Yeah. She was above you on the trapeze and everything. It was absolutely incredible.
I'd love to go to one of the secret cinema events when all of this is over.
Yes.
Do it.
Let us spend 3
Company.
months
So many times
just
I've
doing
never
fun.
seen the film that I didn't think I'd enjoy it.
No, I'm going to spend 3 months of just doing fun at the end of this. That is my decision. It has been made.
Definitely.
And you're all coming to my house and we're all going to lie down.
Are you going to fly me there?
I was saying
maybe.
last night that we should get a minibus and we should tour everyone's houses and have story time in a different place every day.
I think I'm gonna want to get the hell out of my house. I don't care how many times people are like, "No, just take me somewhere else."
Yeah, on the road. Oh my god, we could have like a big story time party. We could have like a night circus / chocolat themed party, and everyone
have a
comes
giant black and white
comes in black and white, and we just eat chocolates.
There we go.
Set up in the woods somewhere.
Well, my next trip to the UK is now completely planned, and also, don't worry, Malcolm, I do have like airline credits and stuff like this because they canceled my flight, so I'm still coming. It'll happen eventually.
Nice. Come to us.
Malcolm, do you think we could persuade Katie to turn Highland Fusion Retreat into Storytime Extra?
Yes. If
I'm
we manage to have that be a thing, then yes. Just yes.
Definitely going to be doing the story.
Yes. Yes.
There should at least be a storytime track.
What
It's
is
such an organised event that we do.
Just story time all day.
You can sign up to read one of your favorite stories. There can be mostly Frankie, but slots in between of other people. And of course, Malcolm.
We can all do our best Frankie impressions.
Oh, I don't know if I want to see that. I dread to think.
We'll have a Frankie-thon. It'll be the contest at the end of story time. You can decide who your favorite Frankie impression is. You can be the judge.